Donald Trump, Part 8, Tears into DeSantis. Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor. Donald Trump is a very interesting example when it comes to the display of narcissism. First of all, as an upper lesser type B, he's an obvious one. And it's unusual for an upper lesser type B to get into a position of success that he has on an international and global scale. Furthermore, with his very obvious behaviours, he provides repeated opportunities to analyse him to explain the narcissistic dynamic. Also, his bombastic and belligerent style is excellent with regard to the arena in which he operates, politics, which demonstrates the way that he deals with his opponents, where they pose a threat to his sense of control, subconscious that it is, but also with regard to his appeal to voters. And therefore, he is a fascinating and useful example of that particular type of narcissist in action. As I mentioned in Part 7, the rise of Ron De Santis, who previously was endorsed by Trump, and it might be said who owes some of his success to holding the line in Florida against the Democrats, well, he now poses a clear and present threat to Donald Trump's presidential aspirations. There is the potential that DeSantis will run for the Republican ticket and thus will be a direct competitor of Donald Trump. The fact that DeSantis won and won big in Florida places him on the radar of Donald Trump. Whilst Trump endorsed many other candidates that succeeded, DeSantis stood out because of the margin of his success and raising the prospect of him having a tilt at the Republican ticket and potentially the presidency in 2024. Because of this prominence, he comes on Donald Trump's radar, and this offends his sense of control. And therefore, Donald Trump's narcissism needs to nullify this threat. And we are, as I predicted yesterday, going to see quite a lot of gloves-off behaviour between these two in the coming months ahead of us. DeSantis also is a narcissist, albeit of a different school. He belongs to mid-range, and I noticed in the comments section that some of you offered your observations, well constructed, with regard to the type of sub-school that he is. This poses a fascinating back and forth between the two, the punchy Donald Trump with a more polished approach of DeSantis. However, Trump is straight out of the blocks again, and with a news report from the BBC written by Boa Deng, we're told ex-US President Donald Trump has lashed out at Florida Governor Ron De Santis as the simmering rivalry between the two top Republicans boiled over. There are some, my observation, that regard Donald Trump as toast. To my mind, that would be an underestimation. He remains very popular with grassroots voters, and he has a substantial war chest at his disposal to have a tilt at the Republican ticket. Returning to the article, Mr. Trump belittled, which is a form of manipulation, his former political apprentice as an average governor, lacking in loyalty. Mr. DeSantis, 44, won re-election in a landslide in Tuesday's midterms, sealing his status as the Republican Party's brightest rising star. Such a victory, of course, will provide him with the means for the assertion of control by winning that election. Furthermore, he'll have received a lot of fuel as a consequence of the knowledge that so many people voted for him and achieving a landslide victory. To utilise some of the words that might be thrown around by his team or even him, he'd certainly be pumped and stoked as a consequence of the subconscious receipt of fuel that he has following this. Returning to the article, he's widely expected to run for the party's 2024 White House nomination. But Mr. Trump, 76, looks increasingly likely to stand in his way. The former president, who has a massive campaign war chest and remains hugely popular with the party's base, would be a formidable opponent for Mr. DeSantis, or any other Republican who dares challenge him. In a lengthy statement on Thursday night, Mr. Trump dismissed the Florida governor, haughtiness, as a political lightweight who had come to him in desperate shape when running for his first term in office in 2017. Demonstrates grandiosity. Ron had low approval, bad polls, and no money, but he said that if I would endorse him, he would win, Mr. Trump said. I also fixed his campaign, which had completely fallen apart. Now, to what extent is all of that true? I don't know, as I wasn't following back in 2017 when Mr. DeSantis came to Mr. Trump. But let us assume for the moment that none of that was true, save that he went to him to get some help. The fact that Trump says he's got low approval, bad polls, no money, and that he would endorse him to win demonstrates the smearing of DeSantis, the insult, and of course Trump's own grandiosity. Of course, it might also be the case that Donald Trump is using the truth in order to manipulate DeSantis, and it was the case that DeSantis had low approval, bad polls, no money, and also said, if you endorse me, I will win. Of course, Trump was president at the time, and therefore there was considerable cachet with his word. And therefore it would seem to me that it was likely that what Trump is saying was true, or essentially true. And therefore what he's done is he's utilised the truth for the purposes of triangulating Mr. DeSantis and smearing him, and portraying himself as the saviour of this man's political career, which of course is the grandiosity that we've come to expect with Mr. Trump. He went on to complain that Mr. DeSantis, whom he is nicknaming Ron De Sanctimonious, was playing games by refusing to rule out a presidential bid, thus labelling him in that way. It's because he keeps affecting Donald Trump's subconscious need for control by not actually stating is he or is he not going to run. Well, in terms of loyalty and class, that's really not the right answer, Mr. Trump added. Insult, smearing. The former president is widely expected to announce his own plan for a White House comeback as soon as next week. While Mr. DeSantis is bathing in the glow of his re-election victory, obviously savouring subconsciously all of that fuel, Mr. Trump has been blamed for the Republicans' disappointing performance in the midterm elections. The race for control of the House of Representatives and Senate went down to the wire. 2 days after Americans went to the polls, it remains unclear which party will control the twin chambers of Congress. Voters by and large rejected candidates who backed Mr. Trump's baseless claims of election fraud in 2020, the article writes. I'm not sure that's entirely correct, but anyway, and many of his high-profile picks for office struggled or lost outright. Even close allies of the ex-president have called for him to reconsider what he has teased to be a big announcement on 15th of November. Republicans have followed Donald Trump off the side of a cliff, one former Trump advisor, David Urban, told the New York Times. I think he needs to put this campaign announcement on pause, Kayleigh McEnany, Trump's former press secretary, told Fox News. Of course, there are those that will smear Mr. Trump. Mr. DeSantis' 20-point win over his Democratic rival Charlie Crist has, by contrast, drawn universal acclaim from conservative commentators. His margin of victory in Miami-Dade County, traditionally a Democratic stronghold, was the largest one by a Republican in 4 decades. According to an October Ipsos poll, 72% of registered Republicans said Mr. DeSantis should have a great deal or good amount of influence on the future of the party. Some 64% said the same of Mr. Trump, age 76. The governor did not immediately respond to Mr. Trump's jibes on Thursday. DeSantis asserting control, probably by referring to Mr. Trump in private, no doubt smearing him, and Mr. DeSantis' own coterie in agreement at that. And then, in other instances, just staying in a position of withdrawal, writing him off in his own mind, and basically looking at his own result, the plaudits that are coming from various people, and, of course, the result of the Ipsos poll, which, whilst Trump is behind him, he's not massively behind him. Mr. DeSantis, of course, is popular, and there are those plaudits for him. But the Donald isn't going to roll over and get out of the way. He's a formidable opponent who is going to have a tilt, and we're going to see yet more shimmy-shammy between these two. It'll be interesting to see how Mr. DeSantis does deal with the repeated needling that will come from Mr. Trump. Mr. Trump's style, of course, where his sense of control is subconsciously affected, is to shoot from the lip, to speak his mind, and to engage in the insults and the smears. He's done this repeatedly. We all know the way that he dealt with Hillary Clinton and other opponents. That's his modus operandi, and is entirely commensurate with his bullying, bombastic, belligerent style as an upper-lesser type B. Whether DeSantis will continue to roll with the punches and ignore it, staying in a position of withdrawal, or whether he will respond in a more polished and considered manner remains to be seen. But either way, we're in for a fascinating contest between these two, which will of course provide us with an opportunity to see what happens when two narcissists collide in a political environment. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.